Hi everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Moneymaker Mondays. The idea behind this series is really just to give everyone an insight into the kind of opportunities I've been involved in throughout my career, whether on behalf of myself, REWD Group, or other external clients. And it's really just to make you aware of the various different opportunities that are out there, and ultimately the kind of money that can be made in property if you know how to identify the correct opportunities and obviously implement the correct exit strategies. So today I'm going to take you through the first one that I think will be really interesting for everyone to understand how the mechanics of this deal came about. But ultimately it's a collective of two properties in Moss Street in Keith, which is a small town in an area of Moray in the north of Scotland. And we're going to split this up into two episodes. And the reason for that being, like I said, is that there's two properties involved, and both of them ultimately have their own merit and credibility as investments. It just so happened that the structure of this deal actually involved the acquisition of both. So I'm just going to give you a broad overview of this half of the property. We're going to focus on the house that's involved in this deal today. We're going to take a look at some of the numbers. I'll give you a bit more in-depth on the background, where the deal came from, what was involved in the acquisition, how we managed to secure this for the client, and obviously we'll explore the numbers. We'll take a look at the refurb that's involved in the property, and then we'll have a look at a couple of exit strategies that the client could implement, depending on their appetite and what their model is. Whether they're looking to add this to their portfolio or potentially just resell it and make a lump sum profit. So we'll take a look at how both of those options would work, and ultimately why this is a viable investment, and just to recognise that these are the kind of deals that are out there. So we'll just get started and we'll take a look at this in more detail. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the opportunity that we're going to take a look at today. So first of all, the type of property we're looking at is an extended 4-bedroom mid-terrace house. It's actually of significant size. There's very large hallways and really high ceilings in this house. There is a bit of a kind of driveway garden type area to the rear. There is a bit of a dispute regarding the communal parking area. Albeit on the title plan for the house, it does have its own private garden. But in order to access that, there's a right of way that you kind of cross over the land that belongs to the cottage. So it's just one of those factors that you have to take into account when you're looking at the viability of this property, and obviously the saleability, if that's going to be your exit, is to flip this. The main road is another factor that was important when analysing this one. It sits on the A9, which is one of the big main roads that runs through the north of Scotland. And in the town of Keith, it's kind of like the only way in and out. So all of the kind of heavy duty vehicles come through here, all the big lorries and everything that's involved with the transport from materials up there to head back down towards Aberdeen. It all passes through this road. So it was another consideration that had to be taken into account when we were analysing this. The other key component is that there is no gas supply to this property or the neighbouring properties. It's a full electric heating system that's in here. Actually, it's Economy 7 storage heating that's provided throughout the property, and not every room has a radiator. So I think in this one there was actually only about 4 storage heaters that were heating a significant, substantial sized house, 4 bedrooms with an office. So the heating system was something that we had to take into consideration straight away. And throughout the whole property in general, very poor condition, very dated, hasn't been upgraded for a number of years. Albeit actually there were some upgrades done to the downstairs shower room and to the upstairs bathroom. But it looks as though that's maybe just been done by the council. I think it was an elderly gentleman that lived here before. So overall it needed a full refurbishment, and that's what the clients had planned for. So to give you an understanding as to where this deal came from, it was originally listed on the open market with a local estate agent. Now, both of the properties were being sold by the same agent, but it was a condition of sale that anyone who was interested in acquiring these had to purchase both. So that's going to put a lot of people off, because a 4-bedroom mid-terrace house could be a perfect family home. Given the size of this property, that's probably who's going to actually use this for what it is as a house. But a cottage, a 1-bedroom cottage, is a very different type of market that you would be targeting. And the fact is that the vendor wanted to sell both collectively, obviously became a bit of an issue. But the reason they were looking to sell it collectively is because they had inherited it. From my understanding, I believe it was the gentleman's dad. He'd lived there for a number of years, and as he passed away, he left the property to his son, and his son was instructed to then deal with it. And typically, you will go to the solicitor, and coincidentally, that is who was trying to market the property. The local lawyer was trying to be the estate agent and sell the property as well. And given the current conditions in the Aberdeenshire market, things are slow as it is. But when you're specific on that you have to buy a 4-bedroom house and a cottage, and the type of condition that the property was in, there's a number of factors as to where it was going to be difficult to find a buyer on this. I believe collectively the whole, both properties was originally listed for 100 and offers over 140. So it was offers over 140,000, and then it was reduced to offers over 130,000. This property itself has a home report value in its current condition for 130. So, they were looking to try and get market value for both of them, and it just wasn't going to get the traction it needed. So ultimately, after struggling to sell on the open market, the gentleman has obviously started to make inquiries about other solutions that can to get the property sold, much quicker, and inevitably he found the correct solution in the form of another sourcer that I work closely with within the market, who brought this opportunity to me to see if we could help place it with an investor offering ourselves to consider. So it came through, a close contact of mine who's very active in the property market just now, and has a consistent flow of deals that we typically work together on. So that ultimately is how we came about this opportunity, and it's a common occurrence actually that, especially with inherited properties, they'll go to the family lawyer that will usually be dealing with the estate. They'll be sorting out the will and making sure everything goes through. And when there's a property involved, it's usually just pretty simple just to say to the lawyer, like, you deal with it, especially if they have an estate agency part within their firm. The lawyer's looking for all angles of the business at the end of the day. But like I said, all the comments are made about the type of market conditions, the type of property, the opportunity they were trying to sell, the condition, the main road aspect and things. There's a number of factors there that would put people off, especially at the price point that they were looking for. So when it was presented to us by a sourcer at a much more agreeable figure, it was very easily to analyse and present it to the clients to see the potential of making profit on this one. So let's take a look at the numbers that made this much more agreeable when the sourcer had presented it to myself to discuss with my clients. So the property in its current condition, bearing in mind I've already explained it was in very poor condition, was valued at £130,000 by a RICS chartered surveyor. Now, the purchase price that we managed to secure this for our clients at, as I explained before, it involved the purchase of both properties, which was a collective purchase price of £90,000. But during the conveyancing process, as they were on separate titles, we had to allocate separate portions, and obviously looking at the ADS that you need to apply to each one. If the properties are below 40k, it would have been an easy solution to put the cottage through at 39,995, in which case we would have reduced the purchase price of the house down to about 50k. which in turn would have reduced the ADS, the additional dwelling supplement that you have to factor in if you own more than one residential property. However, when you look at the big picture for understanding the mechanics of this tax position, and it all depends on your personal circumstances, whether you're buying it in a limited company, when you're buying it in a personal name, and various other factors involved. But if the plan is to resell this property or to justify the markup in the value through the refurbishment works to a lender for the purpose of refinance, when you look at it from a sales point of view, if you reduce this purchase price down to 50k to reduce that ADS by, on this, £680 it would have worked out as, you're then creating a significant gap between the purchase going through at 50k to the end value you hope to achieve at 150 grand. So they're going to start to wonder, where have you gained 100 grand worth of value? And obviously it becomes a capital gains point of view as well, because you're going to be taxed from a capital gains on all the profit that you've made, where if you've registered it that you've only bought it for 50k, that margin, that taxable margin, is going to become a lot more. So we decided to be a bit more conservative with regards to these figures at the point of going through the conveyancing process, in which case we applied a purchase price of 67,000 to this property, and then 23 grand for the cottage. So the legal fees were about £800. The ADS, based on the £67,000 purchase price, was 2,680. The sourcing fee was a collective £4 grand sourcing fee across both properties. Therefore, on this one, we'll just take 50% of that for numbers' sake, and we'll look at it as £2 grand. The refurb. So, as I explained the condition of this property, the full layout of the house involves a lounge, quite a large kitchen to the rear, a downstairs bedroom or dining room, a downstairs shower room, and then upstairs we have 3 bedrooms, one really significant size main bedroom, 2 other double bedrooms, and then we actually have a kind of weird, it was run as a kind of workshop. It had these boards on it, different kind of workstations, with a ladder that actually goes up into the loft. But it was a significant sized room that could be used as an office, a large storage area, perhaps like a laundry room, or simply just like a walk-in wardrobe. It's not enough to be a bedroom, albeit the size is pretty good for any other kind of use, like an office, but there's no external windows or anything into it either. So it's very much just a really big cupboard that's currently being utilised as a workshop. So the footprint of the house is significant, and all of it was just really dated. It needed extensive refurbishment throughout. So when positioning it with the client, we're looking at the scope of the refurbishment works, and the windows are double glazed. They were aluminium frame double glazed windows, but the glazing itself and the windows were in perfectly good condition. Just because they weren't UPVC, it wasn't an essential repair or an upgrade that had to be made. The money could be spent in more appropriate areas throughout the house. But it was clear that the electric storage heaters were going to be a problem. There's only 4 of them within the property. They explored looking at changing the type of heating system, but getting a gas supply from the mains, into the main road, it was just going to be far too expensive and probably just not really worth the headache in terms of the value uplift that they would gain. All the regulations and things and the plans for coming away from gas are all in the back of our heads anyway. So they had the view of trying to upgrade the current electric heating system. But ultimately, with this Economy 7, there's an existing consumer unit that is there, and it provides like a different rate of electricity during the day, with a cheaper rate that kicks in at night. So it's not ideal, but based on looking at where you could genuinely add value to the property, each one of these storage heaters were actually, back in the day, we were advised that they were the top type of heating, top radiators of their kind. So they should still, and they're fully functional now. So it was a case of it would cost £1,000 per unit to replace, and then it was a case of looking at still adding electric panel heaters into the other rooms where there was no radiators at all. So it was just a case of making these decisions on the type of refurb that the client wanted to do, and where they were genuinely going to get benefit from the money being spent. So ultimately they chose, they were going to have these radiators serviced and have new electric panel heaters fitted into the rooms where there were no radiators. So that was one of the main things. On top of that, they were looking at full cosmetic overhaul, fully stripped back, all wallpaper stripped, redecorated, ceilings skimmed and replastered. There was some Artex, get rid of the Artex, skim over it where possible. Upgrade the kitchen in its entirety, upgrade the downstairs shower room, upgrade the upstairs bathroom, and full new flooring, carpets, everything top to bottom was going to be completely renewed. In terms of the electrics, there was some upgrading to the electrics, all new face plates, new light fittings, really the attention to detail on maximising the finish on this. But building relationships with contractors and things is key, and ultimately they had allocated a budget of 25 grand to be able to carry all of this work out on a decent sized property. So it was a fair amount of spend for a considerable amount of work that they had considered. So the total cost, including the purchase price, legal fees, the extra tax for the additional dwelling supplement, the sourcing fee and the refurb cost. Now, I understand that there's other costs involved here, there's council tax that maybe has to come into account, there's insurance costs, there's running costs in terms of gas and electric while the contractors are in and things, but these kind of main numbers are what you can use to structure the deal and look at the analysis of it when you present it to an investor client, or when you as the investor are actually looking at it. These are the headline figures that you need to take into account. So now we've come to the good bit, and we're going to take a look at exactly how we can make money from a deal like this. So one of the first strategies I'm going to look at is buy to let. We're going to have a look at what it might look like in terms of profitability and the performance of this investment should the client choose to add this to their portfolio and rent it out. So we know from the acquisition costs and all the fees related to that and the refurbishment costs that the total investment required on this one is sitting around £97,480. Now, based on the extensive comparable evidence and the due diligence that we carried out on this, we found support to suggest that a 4-bedroom property in walk-in condition at the same size of this one will comfortably achieve an end value of £150,000. Now, I know that the property had a home report of £130,000 when the clients purchased it, but the bottom line is that the property wasn't selling at that figure. It needed a lot of work doing to it, and the surveyor still felt that's what it would be worth. So you might be thinking, if it's worth 130 in that current condition, you spend 25 grand on it, you might be expecting a revaluation somewhere about 170. And now that may well be the case, but through our experience, dealing with surveyors and going through this process, we've often found that no matter what the previous home report value was, the surveyor will carry out their own due diligence. And when they ultimately find out what you've paid for it, there's going to be a bit of an argument as to where have you added all of that extensive value to command a figure at the top. The bottom line is, anyone can sell their property for whatever price they want, but the surveyor will still always challenge that. So you need to find an equal balance, and being conservative on the value when you're assessing a deal is only going to really be beneficial, especially when you're calculating the return to you as the investor. So we've been conservative on this, and we believe that £150,000 will be comfortable to achieve in terms of a revaluation. So looking at it, if it was a case of the client was going to add this to their portfolio and chooses to refinance, a buy-to-let mortgage at 75% of the property's value will allow them to be able to take out £112,500 at the point of refinance. So essentially that means that the bank will then pay the client back £112,500 and secure those funds against the property. Now, as part of the due diligence, we also have to look at what the monthly earnings of this is going to be. Ultimately it's an investment. You want to get a return on your investment. So refinancing it is just one part. The other part is obviously getting a tenant in there that's going to basically pay money every month for the purpose of using the property as their home. So looking at it, the market in Aberdeenshire, as I previously said, is a bit slow. There isn't a lot of demand pushing further up north into Moray where this property is. There's not massive demand in Keith. So a private rental comparable is probably sitting at around about 600 to 650 per month. But for a 4-bedroom property, if you are willing to rent it to a council tenant, the local housing association rate in Moray will pay just under £800 per month for the purpose of providing a home to a family who requires 4 bedrooms. So ultimately that's a guaranteed figure. If you find the right family in that position, the council are guaranteed to pay you that rate, and they advertise that on their website. They'll comfortably tell you what their rates are. So we use that as a guide to understand that we can definitely go down that route and achieve this as a return on a monthly basis. So off of that, we obviously have to consider the costs involved. So the monthly costs that you're going to have are a management fee to your letting agent for finding the tenant, managing everything involved, which is typically about 10%. So we've deducted just under £80 from the cost on that. You'll obviously have to insure the property as well. Now, it all depends on who your insurance provider is. Ourselves at REWD Group, because we've got a substantial portfolio, our monthly insurance costs are maybe like between £8 and £12 per unit, something like that. But for an individual property, you're probably looking at somewhere in the region of about £20 a month, just to insure that. Now, the other factor you need to take into consideration through the refinance is obviously the interest on the loan. So the £112,500 isn't the sale figure. You're borrowing that amount against the property, so you're pulling that money back in. So the interest, we have put it at 4.5%. Now, you may get better rates than that. It all comes down to your personal position, whether you're doing it in your personal name through a limited company or whatever the dynamic would be. I've based this on limited company figures, so 4.5% is typically relatively competitive for that kind of arrangement. So on that, looking at an annual 4.5% interest on the loan of 112.5, the monthly loan repayments work out as £421.88. Now, it's important to consider that I'm only addressing the interest on the loan. This is not considering a repayment term on this mortgage, but if you understand buy to let, you'll understand why that's the way we do it, because we're looking to maximise the cash flow and not pay down the value. We've already created an equity position within this property. So overall, factoring in the total costs and the revalue figures, we're looking at having no money left in the deal at the point of refinance. Not a single penny would be left in from what the guys, the clients have put into this investment. Their total cost was under 100 grand. It's just under £97,500. They're getting 112.5 grand back from the mortgage provider at the point of refinance, which basically leaves them sitting with an extra £15,000 in profit in their bank account and still keeping the property. Now, if they manage to rent it out based on the LHA rates, after deducting costs, and I appreciate there's various other factors involved, smaller costs, but these headline figures, you're looking at over £275 a month positive cash flow, pre-tax of course, but still, you're getting 15 grand in the bank and you're making over £275 per month for passive income. So looking at this one for analysis, as you'll know, if you know REWD Group, we absolutely love buy to let, but you can see clearly why we love buy to let when you consider this deal that we passed on to one of our clients. So, it's really strong positive monthly cash flow. and the fact is you've got an extra 15 grand in the bank. So ultimately you've created an infinite returning asset here, and technically you've been paid to do so. You've been given 15 grand in your pocket just to do this deal, and then earn near enough £300 every month on the back of it as well. So for our clients, it's an easy but no-brainer when we look at this, that buy-to-let could be a potential exit strategy for them. Now, another option where the clients can look to make money on this deal is a buy-to-flip model. Purchase the property, add the value, and sell it on. Simply exit the transaction, no longer take anything to do with the property, make their profit, and move on. It's certainly a viable investment, especially for those who are looking to generate lump sums in terms of cash and profit. There's pros and cons to all strategies. Ultimately, they all make money, and that's what it comes down to. It's about exploring various ways as to how you can maximise the return of an investment, and understanding the correct strategies to implement based on the structure of the deal and what looks best. So if we take buy to flip into consideration with this one, back to the total costs again, we know it's coming in just under 97.5 grand, including the refurbishment costs and all the costs involved during the buying process. The end value, same again, we've been conservative with it, but at 150k, if you can get someone who's willing to buy an extended 4-bedroom house, fully refurbished, upgraded top to bottom for 150 grand, there's definitely evidence to suggest that that would be achievable. So estate agency costs to get it on the market and get it sold, probably looking somewhere in the region between 1 and 1.5%. So factor in about 2.5 grand. Home report, usually it's anywhere between sort of 350 to 450. We know surveyors quite well, so typically about £360. Legal fees again, you'll need to instruct your solicitor to do the conveyancing process on the way back out. So again, we'll allocate about £800. So in total, if you're looking at your sales price at 150k, now again, these are really only the headline figures just to be able to carry out a broad analysis and understanding of this deal. You will have things like the council tax, the gas and electricity, your running costs for the period that you've owned the property, but they're all variable. And that's why we don't get involved in that. Same when we discuss the total potential profit. So looking at these flip figures, if you sell it at 150k, based on all the costs and what it's, the input, the cash invested within this deal, you're looking at nearly making 50 grand in profit. However, that's before tax. And the reason I always clearly say it's before tax is because your tax position is also individual and variable. If you do it in a limited company, it's completely different to how you structure it if you do it in your personal name. So it's important that if you're simply playing the part of the broker and you're presenting the opportunity to the investor, you focus on these broad terms, you focus on the figures that you find evidence in, and you don't discuss the variables, because that's up to the individual to analyse that for themselves. And we talk a lot of that in REWD Essentials. Alex covers the tax point of view from anyone looking to get involved in property, and how best to structure yourself and understanding the difference between investment and trading. So it's just a valid point that if you are a sourcer or a broker and you plan on presenting deals to clients, leave out all these kind of nitty-gritty details that really you cannot answer. Ultimately you've analysed this deal, you know how much it's going to cost, what they're probably looking at, and you know what it's going to be worth at the end of it, and allow them to make their own calculations as to how best they feel they can go and maximise the return on that investment. But ultimately, this one looks, brilliant to consider both a buy to flip or a buy to let strategy. So the clients are very pleased, they move very quickly on it. They did acquire this property cash, which is why I'm talking about refinance in terms of the buy to let. So they're sitting there with this asset unencumbered. So really they have various options to them as to how they would maybe want to exit this. But it all comes down to personal preference, doing the numbers and calculating how they want to make money off of this deal. So that concludes part one of the Moss Street opportunity. I'll pick up with you all next week when we'll take a look at the 1-bedroom cottage, which is very unique, has its own backstory, and yeah, we'll get involved into the overview, the numbers, and how we make money from that as well. Thanks a lot.